The modern battlefield is a mirror. Every signal, every reflection, every move you make bounces back to the enemy. The question is not whether they can find you, it is how long until they do.
I'm the old man.
And I'm Lost LT 1775, an infantry officer and captain in the Marine Corps. Welcome to Lost LT's Razor, where the fight, the leader, and the lessons learned all matter. A platoon reinforced moves through an open desert at dawn. The horizon glows orange in the distance. A forward scout team hears a faint buzzing overhead. Within a minute and a half, IDF hits their last, covered in concealed position. They never once saw the drone, but it doesn't matter. It saw them through thermal imaging. Predictability and inability to adapt faster than the enemy is what killed them. Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 7 of Lost LT's Razor. A little bit non-standard, but what I'd like to do today is just kind of define what we're going to be doing really over the next 2 episodes that we're releasing. So consider this part 1 of 2 that we're going to be releasing. So episode 7 is focusing primarily on continuing to define this problem of small unmanned aerial systems and unmanned systems in general. And part 2 of this episode, which is going to be episode 8, will be focused primarily on the TTPs, small unit SOPs, and just kind of like recommendations of what things you can start doing within your squad or platoon or company right now. So I think it's important that we define it and we don't get caught in a reactive mindset or position ever. So what we need to do is lean forward and lean ahead. And we can look at the news and current battlefields right now, and that's exactly what we're doing. So going to learn from those that are currently in the fighting and start making changes at the tactical level. So that's what we're going to be doing today.
Lost LT, you talk about the current battlefield. What exactly is the threat environment you're facing? So I look at it very simply. When I think of the current threat environment, I mean, this idea of small C-sUAS, it's a massive proliferation that we're seeing across the battlefield. So, I mean, what you have related your time in Iraq and Afghanistan to the Reaper drone and some of the higher level, maybe operational or strategic level assets. Now everyone at the tactical level has the ability to play in the air, right? Like it's not this wild thing that we know about, but we are never going to get direct support or tasking authority over. Like we have this capability at the tactical level. So when I think the threat environment, I think it's important to know that it is a tactical level ISR, and we have strike capabilities and enablers down at the platoon and potentially squad levels. So learning from the current environment and the wars that we've seen very recently in Ukraine and as well as what the IDF have experienced in Gaza, looking at the 2 of those threat environments and understanding, hey, we don't get to dictate where we fight next. The terrain is unknown and where we're going to fight, but we need to figure this problem out sooner or later. And if we don't, then it's just going to continue to keep us on the back foot, which we can't afford. I mean, that's what's going on in Ukraine, obviously with the Israeli Defense Forces, right?
When I think Ukraine, and I think that's probably the more prevalent because I think I've seen a lot more footage, and it's also just something that I've been following very closely. I mean, we all have for years at this point, but you could ask any individual that's fighting on the front lines in Ukraine, and I'm sure they would confirm the persistence of overhead noise. I mean, they've probably gotten incredibly good at understanding the difference in sound of what a friendly drone versus an enemy drone sounds like.
Your opening statement was pretty provocative. You said something to the effect of, the battlefield is a mirror. What do you mean?
Well, when I say the battlefield is a mirror, I think that's just one example that we can use to just kind of create this picture in the individual's mind. So, I mean, understanding that I go back to the individual warfighter a lot when I think of this, because the signals, the reflections. It's not just physical items that are on you. Like your watch will make a reflection when the sun glances off it. The sunglasses or the eye protection that you're wearing, the windshield on your vehicle. There's a lot of physical sensors and identifications, ways that the enemy can identify you, but there's also a lot of things that are hidden that we don't probably understand. I don't want to take the credit away from the warfare. I think we do understand it, but I don't know if we're quite at the level of perfection and expertise and truly understanding radio frequencies and IR thermal considerations. I mentioned it a few episodes ago, but understanding the signature that your watch gives, the signature that your iPhone gives off, all these kind of emitters that are around us. The battlefield is a mirror, and anything that you emit is going to bounce around and just make it easier for the enemy to find you.
You're talking about signals. So obviously these kinds of reflections and signals the enemy's getting, right?
Yes, the enemy is absolutely able to look at your signature and use that in an effort to find you, fix you, and ultimately target you. So yes, that's the problem framing statement really is understand your signal and fix it before the enemy finds you and kills you because of it.
All right, we talk about drones. Are we over-exaggerating their impact on the battlefield? I mean, how immediate is the UAS threat at the squad or platoon level, or are we blowing it out of proportion?
I think that's a great point, because if you got a group of, say, 50 higher enlisted or officer leaders and you ask them that question, I'd be interested to see how 50-50 the results of that answer are. What I mean by that is I think the younger generation, myself included, is very focused and aware of this problem set. I think that the older generation, if you will, in the Marine Corps also recognizes the fact and the severity of this problem, but I don't think they look at it with the same amount of immediate concern. And I could be, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think that there's kind of this hesitancy or tendency to think like, yeah, the character of warfare has changed a dozen times. This is just another aspect of the character of warfare changing, but the nature of warfare remains the same. I think we can all agree on that, right? Like new technology means new ways that wars are fought, is all that's saying. But the reasons and the core root causes of why we go to war are likely going to remain the same. So I personally believe that C-sUAS itself is capable of delivering decisive results that can be exploited to achieve decisiveness on the battlefield. I don't think a drone in and of itself is truly capable of achieving decisive results if there's no maneuver element or Marines, for example, to then go exploit the effects of the targeting of that drone. So that's just my personal opinion, but I do think that to your kind of, I think more the root cause of your question, the immediacy of the UAS threat at the squad and platoon level. I think if I'm a squad leader or a platoon commander right now, this is one of the most important areas that I'm focusing my efforts on in specifically what we're talking about today, which is passive counter-sUAS TTPs, and just kind of recommendations of what you can do to defeat sUAS in its ability to find you and target you.
In previous episodes, Lost LT, you've talked about ISR drones, FPV drones, but I recall you mentioning something about loitering munitions. That's a scary thought. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, when I go back and say the threat for the squad and the platoon level, depending on the platform that you're up against, ISR, FPV, and loitering munitions are all capable of killing you, right? So, I mean, you just need to understand the immediate action drill, the IA drill of what you and your tactical unit is going to do, depending on when you observe an ISR drone, an FPV drone, or if it's a loitering munition. Because we mentioned 1 or 2 episodes ago this idea of the kill chain. How fast is it for an enemy drone to find you and then send up either a call for fire or route an FPV drone to your position, or if it's a loitering munition, what that means is that munition is up in the air loitering, waiting to find a target, and as soon as it identifies it, boom, now it is going to engage and strike that target. So depending on the asset that I see at the squad or platoon level, I need to have very quick and well-rehearsed IA drills and TTPs and kind of reaction to SUAS, if you will.
So in the year 2025, are you saying that UAS drones are high-level or low-level air threats?
I think that the side that has or achieves air superiority is who will win. Now, that being said, can either side ever really truly achieve air superiority when you have this massive proliferation of drones at the tactical level? And there's thousands and thousands of them. So when I think whether it's high or low on that, I think that there's multiple confirmed kills of unmanned aerial systems, like drones, going in and destroying manned aircraft, right? And so I think that's also something that we absolutely need to consider and be careful, at least plan for, because we rely pretty heavily on our assault support aircraft, like our AH-1s and UH-1s, and their ability to go provide close air support. And we now need to be very cautious and aware of how quick and easy it could be if we don't have a layered defense and a layered system overlap, really, of kinetic and non-kinetic effects that can take out drones, because you can have a cheap few $100 drone with some C4 on it that goes in and takes out a manned aircraft now.
You use the terms passive and active when you're talking about SUAS drones. What is a passive drone and what is an active drone?
So it's not the drone itself that is passive or active. It's your countermeasure to it. So when you think counter-sUAS, there are things that you actively do to counter-sUAS. That's your kinetic and non-kinetic effects. So shooting at it with a weapon system, trying to jam it, actively, things that you are actively doing to try to take that down. When I say passive, that's what we're focusing on more so today, because to me, the passive things are understanding your signature, camouflage, and concealment. What can you do to increase survivability within your platoon or your squad right now? Things that you don't need to wait for the government to buy and man, train, and equip you on, if that makes sense. So when I think passive and active, I think active counter-sUAS is obviously more, I can't say more important, but that is probably, like that is the stuff. When I think kinetic things, EW and jamming are great if they work. But as soon as the enemy develops a capability like a fiber optic drone that is immune essentially to jamming and EW capabilities, then we need to have a better way of killing that drone. And then the enemy continues to adapt a new way of getting around that loophole. So it's this constant cat and mouse back and forth, essentially. And that's why we keep coming back to the doctrine of MCDP1 saying, like, the side that adapts faster is going to win.
So when you're talking about passive, you're talking about a defense strategy. And obviously this can't be a kit that you deploy on the battlefield. This is almost a mindset.
Absolutely. The passive counter-sUAS mindset is the key to success. And I think that we mentioned this one or two episodes ago as well, but the behavior change, that is at its core passive counter-sUAS. And so we're really looking at what are the 5 or 6 things that are most likely to get you killed with respect to SUAS, like, and understanding your individual signature. Okay, now let's go and attack each one of those things. And so we look at the basics of camouflage and concealment that we already teach Marines, and now we just add another sentence to them, really, so that we understand what SUAS considerations apply within the basics of camouflage and concealment that you already have learned.
So are you saying, obviously, every squad needs to implement passive measures immediately?
Yeah, every squad can start doing this stuff yesterday. And if they're not doing it right now, then they're already behind the curve. So this is more of a, hey, if you're not doing this, you're wrong, but we're still going to help you out type conversation. And I mean, the idea of higher, like always waiting on higher, I think that's a common sentiment that we hear pretty often. But in this case specifically, and a quick tangent on this, but I distinctly remember on my last deployment having to plan let's just say a defensive position, essentially, in the event that we needed to evacuate American citizens. And we're kind of going through the essential fire support tasks, just in the event that this situation got out of control, and what assets do we have? How can we defend? And then we started having the C-sUAS conversation. And that's really why I'm so passionate about this topic, is what assets did we have at the battalion, company, platoon, squad level for kinetic and non-kinetic effects. And just to be completely honest, we just quite literally didn't have a lot of things. And so, I mean, this idea of waiting for higher to get you the active counter-sUAS measures, that is out of our control at the squad and platoon level to a certain extent. We can voice and need to voice and identify the problem and push that requirement up to higher, make recommendations, right? But ultimately, that's the job of those that are higher ups than us, essentially. And so, I mean, understanding what you can control right now at the squad level is the passive.
So let's bring this right to the ground. Ukraine, Gaza. What are some actual physical examples of what's being done for a passive defense of C-sUAS?
Just a few examples that jump to mind from current conflict. I want to start with the idea of deception and some of the decoys that we've seen used effectively so far. As we know, it's a constant cat and mouse game and back and forth. And so I think one of the more common things that I have observed is the effectiveness of thermal optics, really, on the battlefield. And so regardless of the time of day, you have a black hot or a white hot infrared camera that is a little bit more expensive, but it's on probably a nicer drone that's just going out there as an ISR platform, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and it's just looking for the enemy. So you have this ISR platform that is searching for positions and identifying heat signatures and sources. And so heat is something that we emit all over the place. I mean, we're depending on the environment that you're in, you're walking, your body produces heat. The vehicle that you are driving in produces heat. You can imagine a dozen things that are around you at any given time that push out some sort of signature via heat. And so one of the TTPs that we've seen to be pretty effective is using decoy positions and dummy positions, essentially using MRE heaters. You can use hand warmers, things like that. You dig a hasty fighting position and you throw that inside of a sleeping system or under a tarp or something like that. Guess what? If you throw a pile of hand warmers together, a pile of MRE heaters 150, 200 meters away from your defense where you're actually positioned at, then that is going to be a very easy signature for a drone operator to identify. And that's exactly what you're looking for. You want to throw their attention elsewhere. And so, I mean, you can start doing that tomorrow. That's just one example. Another example that I think of is, I think I've seen very commonly in a training environment, I think what we can learn from the current conflicts is overhead cover and concealment, right? And so deception via dummy positions is one way, but camouflage and concealment overhead, I mean, whether you're using a camouflage net that has RF and thermal blocking in it, you can use Mylar, you can use heat blankets, having almost like a PB, patrol base mindset where you're rotating your positions very frequently. All of this stuff is common sense. It's just having the discipline as an individual and as a tactical unit to hold that standard and understand that if all it takes is one person to get lazy and your unit is dead because your position has been given away via your signature. So, I mean, we're wrong if we're not learning and reading the after actions from Ukraine as well as from the IDF. You know, I mean, there's a few other things that come to mind of like burying cables, moving your ground control stations or antennas in general, just away from your command post or where your COC is, pushing more dispersion, getting lower than the ground level when you got to dig. It's all common sense type things, but I think understanding really what I would sum it up for Marines or for active duty service members is we already know brilliance in the basics from camouflage and concealment and what right looks like in concealing your position. There's really nothing new here other than just making sure that you look up. If you consider the environment a 2D environment, then that third dimension is absolutely going to kill you.
Man, everything you're talking about signatures, at least here in this segment, is thermal. Well, talk to me about thermal. I mean, thermal seems to be age-old technology. Why is it so prevalent now?
Thermal is definitely older than me. I don't know how long it's been around. I should look that up, but I think thermal is almost unfair in how effective it is in identifying heat on the battlefield. If we don't understand our signature and what heat looks like in a white hot or a black hot optic, then I think we're absolutely wrong. For the small unit, what, again, you can start doing tomorrow is understand the concept of thermal crossover. This is something that I've been hearing for years at this point, and I'm sure many of you have as well. But thermal crossover is heavily underestimated and probably undervalued in the effectiveness of it. And really, when I start to call back to another episode we talked about recently, start considering my MET-TC, right? And the time that I want to cross the line of departure or get ready to launch an attack or whatever the tactical task that I'm achieving is. I want to know the period of thermal crossover and make sure I'm moving my unit during that, especially if I think that the enemy has that capability, right? And I think that's a safe assumption at this point. So for those that don't know, thermal crossover is essentially the period of time when the surface, aka the ground outside, and the air temperature are equal to one another. So what that does in a thermal optic or in an IR optic is it reduces the contrast, and really that heat source that you see that pops, it reduces the brightness and the effectiveness of identifying sources of heat. So understanding that, it generally speaking, depending on the terrain, the environment that you're in, the time of year, all those kind of considerations, generally speaking, it occurs about 30 minutes before sunset and about 30 minutes after sunrise. So if you understand that and you can plan that into your movement patterns, you're absolutely buying yourself time and space over the enemy. But you also need to understand that the enemy is probably most likely to do that as well, because thermal crossover is not some magical, crazy thing that no one's ever heard of. Google the words thermal crossover and you can learn much more about it. But essentially what you need to do at the small unit level is plan your movement and displacement periods during periods of thermal crossover. We know that we need to charge batteries. We need to keep our engines running every now and then. That's a constant battle that we're fighting. Is last thing you need is to be out there for a week and your JLTV dies because you don't turn it on every so often and you're charging batteries on it while the transmission's off, right? So if you have to start an engine and you're staying in a static position, maybe you can start that engine or have any time that you need to expose heat sources, whatever that looks like for you at your unit, then you can plan to do some of those actions during periods of thermal crossover, because that's when those IR capabilities are the least effective. Again, we said before, but the environment that you're operating in kind of dictates when that crossover is effective. So, I mean, it's different in desert than it is versus in the forest. That window kind of timing shifts a little bit. So you need to understand as a commander or a squad leader what those approximate windows are in planning, so that you can plan effectively, essentially. Last thing I would say on the thermal crossover piece is for the small unit level to just prioritize your concealment and minimize your movement until the next thermal crossover window. Easier said than done, because that's really only 2 windows per day that will afford you that 30-minute buffer, essentially. But that is realistically the best option. Also, fog, understand that rain also limits your signature. I mean, you can absolutely get around the effectiveness of the sensor, but if it's a clear day or a clear night, then you are in a bad position if you don't have a good way of mitigating the effects of that optic.
Lost LT, our enemy combatants have this same awareness, same technology, right? Is it not a stalemate in chess? I mean, they know, you know.
No, I don't think it's a stalemate. I think that, like you said, thermal's been around for a long time. We just haven't fought a peer or near peer adversary that maybe possesses a lot of that capability. But just because one side or both sides have a capability doesn't mean it translates to decisiveness or decisive contact or effective, like, winning over the enemy. It's the side that adapts faster is going to win. So just because the enemy has thermal doesn't mean that they're 10 feet tall and better than you, right?
Right.
But if you don't treat them, like if you start to dehumanize the enemy or think that they are stupid and they don't know what they're doing, then that's the second that you're going to get caught flat-footed and die.
Thermal crossover in an urban warfare environment must be a cluster.
I distinctly remember doing this in a training environment a few weeks ago as we're really pushing the envelope and trying to force behavior change at the small unit level. We give the enemy and friendly forces, Skydios or whatever other drone you want to throw at them that has a thermal capability. It is pretty monumental of a kind of like a oh shit moment to have a drone that's a few hundred meters above you and outside of the city, and you can take a screenshot and then blow that thing up and look and count like 15 to 20 very obvious signatures of people standing in windows deep inside of a building. I mean, thermal is incredibly effective. So regardless of the terrain, I'd say it's obviously very effective in wide open terrain. It's effective in a thick, dense forest. If you saw the post that we put on the other day on Instagram, it took 2 pictures. The first one was the EO electro-optical camera of just regular shape and color that you would see, and then it was that same picture from the drone's other camera, which is thermal. And all of a sudden you see what looks to be a squad or maybe a platoon in kind of a cigar-shaped ORP in the woods. And that regular camera didn't see a thing. But as soon as it switched over thermal, very obvious, probably 20 or 30 positions that are highlighted. So I'd say, yeah, regardless of the environment, but it's especially lethal in an urban environment where we're already closer to each other in a fight. Just means it's that much faster potentially that enemy could react to identifying your position and throw some sort of killing asset on it, whether artillery, FPV, direct fire weapon systems, etc.
Lost LT, in our closing minutes here as we wrap this up, all of this has to have some pretty significant leadership implications. How, as a leader of Marines, do you incorporate all of this, including things like thermal crossover?
You can't wait for someone to solve the problem for you. I think if the commander doesn't have the ability to execute whatever the mission is and really think forward and think into the future, do independent study, read your own resources, come to your own conclusions, and find ways to make your unit more lethal and increase their survivability. If you're not doing every single one of those things and more, then you're wrong. And quite frankly, like, you are just waiting for someone else to solve your problem, and that's going to get your Marines killed. If you're not setting and building SOPs and building TTPs for your unit right now, then you're wrong. One of the more common things, especially because this is, we say it's new, but it's really not new. It's been on the battlefield for a while now, and we're just kind of rapidly trying to figure it out and catch up. And that's okay. I mean, better late than never, I suppose. But you can't wait for doctrine to come out. You can't wait for examples of how to do certain things to come out with pretty little graphics for you to understand the steps in order. See a problem and fix a problem. And as soon as the Marine Corps or the Department of War standardizes something for forces all across NATO to go off of, then okay, cool, you can flex on that. But you need to start training to this stuff right now, and it's on you ultimately as the commander. Create SOPs, think outside the box, use the small things that you should have already been doing, like your individual camouflage and concealment. Having discipline at the small unit level is not optional. It has to be the standard. You need to understand your signature with respect to thermal. You need to use decoy positions. You need to move your ground control station for wherever you're launching friendly drones from. Move that position off and assign a security to it, and make sure that they have overhead cover and concealment. It's quite simple. It's just basics that will get us killed if we don't understand and recognize the importance of them. And I think now more than ever, the basics are absolutely critical.
Lost LT, I have believed, I wasn't around for the end of World War II, but I believe since the World War II ended, that American pilots have owned the skies. We never had to face off with MiGs in the Cold War, and certainly have not seen anything that has thrown us back. Do American pilots still own the skies, or is there a change?
I think it's a great point, because we've just expected, at least, and I'm sure you can attest to this, but at least over the last 25 years, we have gone into every fight just expecting that we have air superiority. Can we expect that in the future fight? I would say absolutely not. At least from we talked about this crazy crystal ball the other day. I don't see. I think that's going to be our goal. That's going to be very quickly one of the things that we try to achieve the fastest. And I don't want to speak too much hypothetical here, but I think that the takeaway with small UAS is that it's so easy to throw up SUAS and go disrupt an enemy system and disrupt aviation and pilots in general. I mean, we know how hairy our pilots are already getting about throwing SUAS and having it in the same airspace as them, because they don't want to get taken out by a $500 drone, and neither do you. And now you've got dozens and dozens and dozens of drones that are being flown at the tactical level, plus enemy drones that are also being flown at the tactical level. This idea of the rear, close, and deep fight, like this battlefield has just, I think, condensed to where the lines of what rear and close and deep are kind of blurred, and it's all over the place. And so you can't make the assumption that you're safe anywhere, and you need to be prepared everywhere.
Lost LT, what are we talking about next week? Tease it.
So next week, it's going to be tailored more to the specific TTPs and like defining the immediate action drills of just more detailed specifics. So, I mean, we'll go into kind of some of the detection and early warning capabilities, further explain deception and signature management control, some of the MCON type open source conversations, as well as just discipline and movements, rapid displacing and continuing actions as you go longer term into the fight. And then a little bit more so kind of double tapping some leadership culture and training stuff, as well as I've got a whole list that I wrote out of recommendations of TTPs that I think squad leader could take tomorrow and start teaching their guys.
Folks, you've been listening to Lost LT's Razor with Lost LT and the Old Man. Join us again next week for another episode on wherever you get your podcasts. Lost LT fires a new podcast episode downrange every Tuesday. Make sure to follow the Lost LT's Razor on Spotify and Instagram so you get the weekly reminders. So until next time, Semper Fi.
All right.